Coronation Street teases that Brody's loyalties are about to be tested in ways no one could have predicted. The night air in Weatherfield was heavy with anticipation, as if the rows of terraced houses themselves were holding their collective breath. Under the dim glow of the street lamps, Brody Walker paced the length of the cobbled courtyard behind number 9, his mind racing. He could still feel the phantom weight of his father's disappointment, could almost hear Lou's admonishing voice chastising him for his reckless bravado. But tonight was not about Lou, it was about Mick Carter, the notorious fugitive who had ensnared Brody's curiosity, and, perhaps, his soul. Brody's first encounter with Mick had been as electric as it was forbidden. He had stumbled upon the wanted man by accident. The chance glance into the snug's back room had revealed Mick's hardened silhouette, shadowed by cigarette smoke and a growing pile of newspapers plastered with his face. That night, Mick's steely gaze had locked on Brody's, and in that moment something dark and irresistible had passed between them. Brody, only 18 and hungry for independence, saw in Mick a dangerous glamour he had never felt under Lou's stern roof. Sally had warned him, girls rarely understood the law of rebellion, but it had been too late. Mick had drawn him in, promising secrets and escape, and Brody, eager to prove himself, had followed. The memory of that first clandestine meeting still sent a thrill through Brody's veins. He had crept out of the house under the pretense of sleeping in his own bed, leaving Sally to assume he was simply too tired to join the family for breakfast. Sally, ever trusting, had not doubted him. Tim, preoccupied with the children's laughter and the endless chores of running number 9's microcosm, had barely noticed Brody's absence. As far as they both were concerned, he was safe, wrapped in his own world of teenage solitude. Little did they know that while they believed him harmlessly ensconced in his room, he was meeting with a man whose lack of scruples could cost Brody his life. Tonight's meeting had been arranged in the shadows beyond the snick of the iron gates, Mick's chosen rendezvous point. Brody had slipped away after dark, his heart pounding so loudly he feared it would betray his presence. The wind carried a chill, and every snapping twig sounded like the approach of the police. Brody's palms were slick with sweat as he neared the agreed-upon spot, an abandoned warehouse facade, its windows boarded and its doors bricked up. But from within, he could hear muffled voices and the faint drip of water echoing through the empty halls. Mick emerged from the darkness like a spectre. His trench coat was dusted with grime, and his eyes gleamed with a predatory focus. He beckoned Brody with a crooked finger, a silent command that Brody obeyed without hesitation. The pair slipped inside through a narrow gap in the boarded doorway. The walls were covered in graffiti, messages scrawled by those who had passed through, desperate, guilt-ridden, or merely thrill-seekers like himself. Brody's heart pounded as Mick shut the gap behind him, sealing them in the musty stillness. "Thought you'd miss your curfew, kid." Mick's voice was low, smooth, but edged with a dangerous undertone. He paced before Brody, sizing him up. "Lou don't know what you're mixed up in, does he?" Brody swallowed. He had rehearsed his lie. "I told Sally I'd crash here. Didn't fancy walking home in the dark." He tried for a confident grin, but his trembling lips betrayed him. Mick's lip curled into a smirk. "Right? And you fancy hanging out with me more than your little family? Funny that." He stepped closer, invading Brody's space. "I need a favor." Brody stiffened. He should have known it would come to this. He'd hoped Mick would revel in his admiration, ask for nothing more than company. Instead, tonight's assignment felt like a trial by fire. "I need you to help me get out of town," Mick said, his eyes flicking to the boarded window as if assessing every exit route. "The cops are tightening the net. You're the only one I can trust." Brody's chest tightened. The last thing he had wanted was to become complicit in a felony. But then he remembered the sparks of exhilaration he'd felt when Mick had first welcomed him into this dangerous orbit. He inhaled, trying to steel himself. "I'll help," he whispered, scarcely believing his own words. "What do you need?" The plan Mick revealed was elegant in its simplicity, and horrifying in its implications. He would use Brody as a decoy, drawing police attention north of town, while he slipped out to meet a contact, who would smuggle him across the border. Brody's role was to be the bait. Make enough noise, be visible, give the impression that Mick was cornered in the warehouse. Meanwhile, the real Mick would vanish. Brody hesitated. He saw the logic. He was young, reckless, and already suspected by no one. But his conscience bristled. This was beyond sneaking into a bar with a fake ID, or sneaking cigarettes from double glazing. This was aiding a wanted criminal. If anything went wrong, if Mick betrayed him, Brody's throat went dry at the thought. Before he could answer, Mick's phone buzzed. He checked the screen, his jaw clenching. A message from an unknown number: "Time's up. We move now." He glanced at Brody. "We gotta go. No more stalling." Outside, the distant wail of sirens cut through the night. Brody's heart leapt into his throat. They were cutting it too close. He looked at Mick, expecting fear or uncertainty, but saw only grim determination. "I'll do it," Brody said, voice steadier than he felt. "But promise me you'll stay safe." He sounded foolish even to his own ears, as if a criminal mastermind would heed a teenager's plea. Mick's laugh was hollow. "Safe's not in my vocabulary, kid. But thanks for caring." They slipped out through a hidden side door. The sirens grew louder, closer, and Brody realized they were heading straight into the police's line of sight. He steeled himself, recalling everything he'd learned about misdirection in the late-night crime thrillers he and Tim used to watch. His role: draw the blue lights, buy Mick an extra 10 minutes. In the street, Brody crouched behind a crumbling wall, pulling a hood over his head. He could make out the flashing red and blue beacons sweeping past the warehouse. His stomach churned as he crawled toward the main road, the pounding of his own pulse competing with the sirens. He needed to be visible, but not too visible. He needed to play the part of the hunted. Suddenly, a patrol car rounded the corner. Brody froze, then darted across the road, waving his arms, shouting for help. The officers spotted him, tires screeching to a stop. "Hey!" Brody called. "Over here." He went that way. He pointed toward the warehouse. 2 officers leapt from their car, weapons drawn, heading in that direction. Brody exhaled shakily, but relief was short-lived. He heard footsteps behind him, fast, heavy. He spun to see Mick charging toward him, his face pale in the strobe of police lights. "What the hell are you doing?" Mick hissed, grabbing Brody's arm. "Run." But in that moment, a patrol car swung around, lights illuminating Mick's trench coat, and the distinctive tattoo curling up his forearm. The second officer froze, recognition flashing in his eyes. "Hold it," the officer barked. "That's him." Brody's heart plummeted. He had played his part too well. Mick sprinted past him, disappearing down a narrow alley. The officers gave chase, leaving Brody standing alone under the harsh glow of streetlights. Breathless, Brody sank to his knees. His ruse had worked. Mick had escaped into the night. But at what cost? He looked at his shaking hands, his knuckles white. He had lied to Sally, betrayed Lou's trust, and nearly abandoned his family for the lure of adventure. In the morning light, the aftermath would reveal itself. Sally would wake, make breakfast for Tim and the children, and notice the empty bed across the hall. She would worry, panic. Tim would juggle calls with the police, desperate to find his son. And Brody would be left to face the wreckage of his choices. He wondered, as dawn bled into the sky, whether Mick would keep his promise to come back for him, or whether this would be the final twist in a dangerous game. Brody rose unsteadily, brushing dust from his jeans. He glanced back at the alley where Mick had vanished and then turned toward home. Every step felt heavier than the last. He had gambled on a criminal's code, and now he would pay the consequences. The sun rose over Coronation Street, ignorant of the turmoil brewing in number 9. But soon, very soon, nothing on Weatherfield would remain the same. The dawn light crept through the curtains at number 9, painting pale stripes across the living room carpet. Sally stirred first, yawning beneath the weight of a restless night. She glanced at the empty armchair where Brody should have been curled up, and her heart dropped. Coffee forgotten, she rushed through the kitchen, calling his name. Tim looked up from the stack of school bags he was sorting. "Have you seen Brody?" Sally's voice trembled with panic. Tim's brow furrowed. "He said he was spending the night at a friend's." He checked his watch. "That was hours ago. He always tells us where he is." Sally's mind flashed back to the note Brody had left on his bedside table, "Sleeping here. Don't worry." Only it hadn't been a note at all, but a text, "Good night, I'm staying here." Sally's chest tightened. No text of reassurance had arrived in the early hours. Her phone lay abandoned on the sofa, its screen dark. Within minutes, the living room became a flurry of activity. Tim grabbed his coat, urging Sally to call the police. She dialed 999 with trembling fingers, explaining her son's disappearance. Down the hall, the children stirred, bewildered by their parents' distress. Sally wrapped them in blankets, murmuring promises that everything would be all right, though her gut twisted with fear. Outside, blue lights pulsed in the street as 2 patrol cars drew up. PC Harper and PC Mills stepped inside, notebooks in hand. "We'll do a quick canvass," Harper said kindly, but firmness underlay her tone. "Did Brody mention any plans?" Tim swallowed. "He said he was meeting someone. He didn't say who." He exchanged a worried glance with Sally. "He's been distant lately." Back at the warehouse, Brody stirred from an uneasy sleep on a damp concrete floor. He had dozed only briefly, exhaustion overtaking adrenaline. Slivers of morning light filtered through a crack in the boarded-up window. Mick was gone, vanished into the night, and Brody's relief was tinged with dread. He gathered his jacket and crept outside, jaw aching from the cold. His phone buzzed once, ruthlessly. A text from an unknown number. "You've done well. Now wait. Don't call." Brody's stomach flipped. He recognized the number format as the same one Mick's phone had used. Mick's demand had been clear: Brody would be used as leverage. Mick wasn't gone, he was simply hidden until Brody received word. Brody's first thought was to run back home, to safety, to Sally and Tim, to the warm chaos of family life. Yet he knew better. As soon as he breached the shadows, Mick's allies, or the police, would be on him. He texted Sally once, hoping she would understand. "Can't go home yet. Don't call me. I'll be safe. Promise." He pressed send, then pocketed the phone and melted into the hushed streets. Dawn had quieted Weatherfield, but rumors of last night's sirens would spread quickly. Brody skirted past the Rover's return, paused to glance at the familiar windows, then ducked down a side alley. He had no plan except to follow Mick's instructions, whatever they were, until he saw a way out. Later that morning, Kit Connor arrived at the police station. Word had reached him, Mick Carter's name whispered among officers, tied to Brody's disappearance. Kit, a detective sergeant assigned to fugitive cases, had tangled with Mick before. He understood Mick's brutality, his flair for psychological games. When PC Harper mentioned a ransom demand, Kit's jaw clenched. Ransom, he repeated. You're sure? Mills nodded. We intercepted a call. Mick used Brody as a bargaining chip. He's demanding a drop, 40,000, to be delivered to an abandoned mill outside town. Kit paced the small interview room. 40 grand was steep, too steep for a teenager's rescue. Sally and Tim could never raise that kind of money in time. Kit leaned back, mind racing. Mick's tactics had always been ruthless: use the innocent to bait their target, then strike. Kit knew that if he walked into an ambush alone, Mick would have the upper hand. He picked up the phone and dialed Tim's number. Tim answered, voice wavering. Tim, it's Kit. I'm handling your son's case. Please, detective, you have to. Kit cut him off gently. We have Mick on the line. He wants cash in exchange for Brody. I'm going to need your help, and Sally's. But no one goes in alone. Tim exhaled, relief mingling with dread. What do you need me to do? Kit outlined a plan. Tim would gather as much money as he could. Kit would bring the rest from police funds, disguised as unmarked. Sally would stay at home with the kids, out of harm's way. Kit would then meet Mick at the agreed location. But he'd bring a small tactical team hidden nearby, ready to move on Kit's signal. Tim balked at the idea of his friend risking himself, but Kit insisted, if Mick suspects a sting, he'll hurt Brody. That afternoon, number 9 was eerily quiet. Sally paced the hallway, clutching Tim's jacket, as if she could anchor him in place. The children played in the front room, oblivious, their laughter a haunting counterpoint to the tension. Tim counted banknotes on the kitchen table, face pale under the fluorescent lights. He stuffed cash into an envelope, stapled it shut, then tucked it into his coat. Outside, Kit parked a plain white van in the shadow of Old Mills by the canal. Through binoculars, he spotted Tim walking toward the rendezvous point, envelope in hand. Kit's team lay concealed in the van. They all wore plain clothes, but concealed weapons. Kit's heart thudded. He had no illusions about Mick's cruelty. At the canal's edge, an abandoned mill loomed, its broken windows like black eyes. A single lamp flickered by the side door. Tim approached, head down, footsteps echoing. Brody, panting and disheveled, was half hidden in the shadows. Relief washed over Tim's face, but it died as a second figure stepped from the gloom. Mick Carter, trench coat collar turned up, a glinting pistol in his hand. Step away from him, Mick commanded, voice low, deadly calm. You got the money? Tim raised the envelope. Please, Mick, let Brody go. Mick sneered. I don't do exchanges without proof. Brody, say something. Brody's voice cracked. Dad, I'm fine. Please. Kit radioed his team, on my mark. 2 officers in dark jackets flanked the mill's rear entrance. The tension hung thick like mist over the canal. Mick's finger was poised on the trigger. Tim's hand shook as he held out the money. Suddenly, tires screeched, another car pulling up behind the mill. Mick's head snapped toward the sound. In that split second, Kit burst forward, shouting, Police! Drop your weapon! Mick spun, firing a shot. The bullet shattered the lamp above, plunging the mill into murky darkness. Brody ducked behind his father, chest pounding. Tim dove toward his son, pulling him down. Kit and his team fanned out, weapons drawn, yelling commands. A second shot rang out, embedding in the brick wall beside Mick. He cursed, spinning again, then flung the pistol toward the canal. The weapon splashed in the dark water. Kit lunged forward, tackling Mick to the ground. They grappled, mud flying, until 2 uniformed officers pulled Mick from Kit's grasp and slapped handcuffs on him. Tim scrambled up, grabbing Brody in a fierce hug. Brody's body shook, but he clung to his father, tears streaking his dirty cheeks. Kit approached, pulling off his cap. "Here's yours now." Sally burst onto the scene seconds later, breathless, panic etched on her face. She ran to Brody and Tim, sobbing with relief. Tim held her close, whispering, "He's safe. He's safe." Kit stood back, watching the emotional reunion. He offered a hand to Mick. "You have the right to remain silent." Mick closed his eyes, rage and resignation battling on his face. That evening, back at number 9, the family gathered in the living room. Lou had rushed over as soon as he heard the news. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face stone, until he saw Brody wrapped in Sally's arms. His hard shell cracked, he cleared his throat, stepping inside. Brody rose unsteadily, rubbing his jaw. "Dad," Lou's voice caught. "Son, you scared the life out of us." He pulled Brody into a rough embrace. "You stupid fool, what were you thinking?" Brody's eyes brimmed with tears. "I thought I was helping him, Dad. I wanted to matter." Lou's grip tightened. "You matter to me. To this family. Not to criminals." He sighed, loosening his hold. "You'll be grounded for a month. And you're coming with me to therapy sessions. You hear me?" Brody nodded miserably. Sally stepped forward, smoothing Brody's hair. "We're just glad you're safe. But we need to set some ground rules." Tim offered a tired smile. "Family first. Got it?" Brody looked from his mother to his father, then at Kit, who stood by the fireplace. Kit nodded, as if to say, "We're here for you." Brody swallowed. "I'm sorry." Lou's expression softened. "Come on, lad. Let's get you cleaned up. You look like you've been through a war." As the family dispersed, Lou and Brody headed upstairs. Tim and Sally shared a private embrace. Kit lingered at the door. Brody caught his eye. "Thanks," Brody whispered. "For everything." Kit offered a small, proud smile. "Just doing my job. But don't make this a habit, yeah." Brody managed a weak grin. "I promise." Later that night, in his cell at Weatherfield Police Station, Mick Carter stared at the ceiling. The harsh fluorescent light glared down on him, mocking. He had lost Brody's trust, lost his freedom, and worst of all, shown his weakness. Yet a spark of defiance flickered in his eyes. He knew Kit would build an iron case against him, but that case could take months to wind its way through court. And in the meantime, well, Mick prided himself on patience. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled photograph, Brody, smiling, holding a soccer ball. Mick studied the boy's face, wondering if one day Brody might forgive him. Perhaps he deserved forgiveness, but not yet. For now, Mick would wait, bide his time, and plan his next move. Because in Mick Carter's world, the game was never truly over, and he never played to lose.